Hi there, and welcome to another live Insomnia open class. Hope you're doing really well today. And I'm, as always, waiting to see what questions pop up, and I'll answer them live here. I'll be live about 20, 25 minutes, something like that. Now, as we're waiting for some questions to pop in, firstly, I want to announce that our latest book, Tales of Courage, there it is, Tales of Courage, is available as an ebook now. Amazon just approved it yesterday, so it is available again as an ebook on Amazon. So you can hop on there if you like it. You can actually read the first like 3 chapters or so are actually available to read as like a preview. So definitely, if you think you might be interested in hearing like stories of others who've gone from like really struggling with sleep to leaving that struggle behind and finding peaceful sleep and living the lives they want to live, etc., then check it out. I think it's a really, really powerful book. Now, beyond that, as we're waiting for questions to pop in here, we already have one. I was gonna share some random things, but we have a question here. So let's take a look at it. And it's from Agnes, who is live with us. Nice to have you back here, Agnes. Agnes says, "Hi, coach. It's me again. When you say that hyperarousal is the thing that keeps us awake, you mean the mental state of hypervigilance/worry exclusively?" Thanks for the question. And I want to say that there are, of course, there's a little follow-up here. Or can the other isolated physical symptoms that come with hyperarousal, palpitations, adrenaline rush, jerks, etc., keep us awake as well? Yeah, totally. I think I completely understand this question. Now, when we say hyperarousal keeps us awake, yes, it is really, in my opinion, always hyperarousal that keeps us awake. Meaning, there can be a whole range of like circumstances can keep us awake. For example, you strained your ankle and you have a lot of pain from the ankle, right? Then that pain can keep us awake. But really, even when it's something like very tangible like that, like pain, it is also hyperarousal that keeps us awake. The pain keeps us like in a more hyper-aroused state, in a more hyper-vigilant state. Or if it's noise from your neighbor, that's something very tangible. Like, of course, that can keep us. That's annoys us. That's disturbing to us. That's another form of hyper-arousal that keeps us awake. So I would say anytime that we are sleepy, like our body's sort of ready for sleep, but we're not sleepy, it's always hyperarousal in some shape or form that is keeping us awake. Yes. Now, the follow-up to that was like, I want to make sure I want to read it. Can isolated physical symptoms that come with hyperarousal keep us awake too? And I would say that it's more like the reaction to them rather than the hyperarousal, than the manifestation itself that then keeps us awake. Let's say somebody has been scared for some reason, right? In the context of insomnia, it's like, what keeps the struggle going on is the fear of not sleeping or the fear of being awake. But fear can come from different reasons. Let's say we have some hyperarousal, and that leads us to have palpitations. Then the palpitations in themselves, I think, have a very minimal impact on whether we sleep or not. But if we think, I shouldn't have these palpitations, why are they happening? If we react to them in that way, then we are even more hyperaroused, and then we stay awake. So in my opinion, I don't think the hyperarousal or the jerks, the palpitations or the jerks or like those type of physical manifestations of fear, they in themselves don't keep us awake. It's rather our reaction to them or the underlying hyperarousal as well that keeps us awake. And one final note on this, it's funny because I just talked a little bit randomly before we have questions. I was actually going to talk about hypnic jerks. That was my plan. But to finish this off, I want to say that hypnic jerks are exceptionally common. I've shared this many times. Usually when, me and my wife, we like to watch some Netflix in bed with the laptop, like right in front of our eyes, like just before we sleep, right? That's what we like to do. And my cue that it's time to like turn off the show we're watching is that my wife goes like that, has the hypnic jerks. And I don't think she's even aware of it. So to answer this question fully, yeah, I think the hypnic jerks and other sort of physical things that happen like that, they don't keep us awake unless we are scared of them and we react to them. So I hope that made sense to you, Agnes. And thanks for being here and for sharing that question. All right, so Libby has been with us also for many lives, and is back here, and says, I can't seem to sleep well for more than a few nights at a time. I'll get on a roll and start feeling so much better and boost my sleep confidence. Then it's like once I finally, where is it? Once I finally start feeling well rested, I start to worry I won't be tired enough to sleep, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then after several nights of poor sleep, so exhausted, I finally sleep well again, and the cycle continues. How do I break this? Okay. Well, Libby, thanks for sharing this and for asking this. This is very, very, very common, and in our natal teaching, we call this experience or this phenomenon success regress. So let's take the opportunity to talk about success regress. So when we are in the state of like what I like to call Oz, which is when you haven't learned anything, you're completely new to our teaching, you're completely bewildered and scared and puzzled, and you don't know what's going on, right? Then you often are awake for it takes a long time falling asleep. You're awake a long time during the night, etc. But then you start learning, okay? Then you start understanding, the insomnia is because I'm scared of being awake. I can befriend wakefulness. I can let go of, I can follow the timeless way and things of that nature. And then with education and a little bit of courage, things often starts getting a little bit easier. You find that you fall asleep a little bit easier, sleep happens easier as the anxiety fades thanks to education. Now, what then can happen very, very, very oftenly is that you start having you have that one night where you slept well, and maybe 2 nights where you sleep well, right? And that feels kind of good, you're on the right track. But at the same time, one thing is different now, which is as opposed to before when you were in this like Oz stage, now you have something to lose, right? Now it feels like I have something. I finally starting to grasp it. And as odd as it may sound, starting to sleep easier can actually be a reason we have more trouble sleeping, because now we've seen things getting easier, and now we're like, now I have something to lose. What if I can't string 3 nights together? What if it stops at two, right? And then the pressure builds to keep this kind of momentum going, and we're now trying to sleep again. We're now hoping that it will continue, right? And then we have trouble sleeping again, right? And then we have, because of the pressure to kind of keep that quote unquote success going, we struggle, and then we sort of have nothing to lose again. Then there's no pressure to sleep. Then we're like, well, if I sleep tonight or not, it doesn't, the pressure is not there anymore. And then we sleep easier, right? And this is what we call success regress. Very, very common. And the key really, I think, meeting success regress is education, understanding why it happens. Because whenever we think something is normal and it's not strange, that makes things so much easier. And also, built into the name is a little teaching, success regress. It sounds, I like the name because it kind of sounds nice, success regress, and it immediately tells you a little bit about what the teaching is about. But the key thing is that when we don't look at sleeping as a success, then there is no regress. So when we don't, when we start sleeping easier, it can seem like, yes, I got it. Oh, I got 2 nights in a row. I got 3 nights. What if I get 4? Oh, how can I get 5? And then the pressure is too much. But when we don't look at it as success, when we look at it as like, yeah, I slept easier because I wasn't trying so much, I have more education, then that pressure doesn't build, and there's no more success regress. So hope that makes sense, Libby. And we will continue with, oh, Jamie Robert is here and said that was an excellent question. I'm very glad to see Jamie Robert here. That's my wife. That's my wife. She's watching somewhere else. All right. Peace is here and says, hello, coach. During the summer, I've scheduled 2 big events which are important to me: my wedding and traveling abroad. Although I know pretty much every teaching you have, I have a feeling of anxiety. I have a feeling of anxiety lately about not being able to handle all the preparations due to the poor sleep I will have. Okay. So yes, I see. I think that was all that I found there from Peace. So Peace, yeah. First of all, I want to say that this is a very common type of question when something is on the horizon and you're worried about like a trip or an event or somebody visiting or something like that. That can be a little bit scary because we may think of that event causing trouble sleeping, or we may think, if I don't sleep, I can't do this thing that I want to do. And so this teaching, the type of teaching that I think applies here is what we call anticipatory insomnia. That's within NADA, within our school, we talk about anticipatory insomnia, and we have a lot of teaching around anticipatory insomnia. And what can we learn here? Well, firstly, when somebody has this question around anticipatory insomnia, the first thing I always say is that the fact that you have these plans is amazing. That's really, really amazing, because you are making plans even though you know that you may not sleep as well, when there is changes, when something is different, when we're doing something different. And this, that you're making plans even though you know that those plans can cause some sleep disruption, that is courage. That shows so much courage and bravery, and that is amazing. And I think the first thing I always teach here is that, like, take a minute to just acknowledge that, like, give yourself some kudos, give yourself credit, because this is brave, very, very brave. That's kind of the number one. And that's kind of the first teaching I go to in terms of, like, anticipatory insomnia. Now, the second thing is this, that when we know that something is likely to disrupt our sleep, we can see that it's going to happen in 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. As humans, we of course would like to prevent that, do something ahead of time, because we know that's going to happen, right? So we want to do something ahead of time that minimizes the sleep disruption or insomnia, like that takes us to a place where it's not as likely as we will have a lot of trouble. Now, the paradox here, of course, is that the more things we do to try to prevent ourselves from having trouble sleeping in the future, or when this event comes, the more likely that we'll have trouble. The more things we do, like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going to bed at the same time. I'm going to stop drinking coffee. I'm going to do this and that. That actually just causes more preoccupation and more buildup of anxiety and things like that. So, as odd as it may sound, what really helps is actually to not do anything to try to optimize sleep when this event happens, right? Because, again, that the more we try to prepare ourselves or prevent ourselves from losing sleep, the more likely we are to lose sleep. So that's the second thing. And thirdly, what I always share is that once you've given yourself kudos for planning it, you're not doing anything to, like, try to prepare yourself for what's going to happen. You're willing to face what's going to happen. Then when you've gone through this thing, whatever you did, then again it's time for kudos. It's like you did it. You may very well have been tired. You may very well have slept less than you would have liked to, but you can find that you can still do really, really a lot of meaningful things, like things that require concentration, even if you didn't sleep like you would have liked to. And when you see that, that's amazing, because then that fear of, like, upcoming events, the fear of trips or a wedding or things like that, it will just fade, because you've seen that you already gone through it. So those are kind of my go-to teachings around anticipatory insomnia piece. And again, it's really brave to even just plan these things. Kalia says hi. Pronounce my name Kuliya. Kuliyu. Nice to meet you, Kuliyu. I don't think Kuliyu had a question, but very nice to meet you, Kuliyu. Very well. We have Killer Kenyan here, who also was here last week, and who says, "Hey, Coach Daniel. Hello. I'm aware of the stages of recovery from insomnia, and I'm aware of the stages of recovery from insomnia is anxiety. Oh yeah, then sleep, then fatigue. Right. From your experience, when does your clients typically recover from fatigue?" Okay, that's a very nice question. And just to clarify, yes, I believe, everyone's recovery journey is different. It's nothing that is linear or entirely predictable. But yes, what tends to happen is that first we start learning and we are less anxious. But we can be less anxious and still kind of, like, curious, like, okay, I'm less anxious. Am I going to sleep more? And that hyperarousal that comes from, like, the curiosity and just wondering, or some residual fear, can keep us from sleeping. So oftentimes anxiety starts to fade first, but we don't sleep anymore. And then the next step that happens is, like, thanks to the anxiety fading, and we're also less curious about our sleep. Kind of thanks to vacation, sleep happens more. The hyperarousal fades, and there's a little bit of lag time, but then we sleep a little bit easier. But what can happen then often is that as the hyperarousal comes down, we actually feel our fatigue that has been masked by the hyperarousal, right? There's been this struggle. We've been like in this like problem solving mode. We've really exhausted our brain to trying to find the solution. And we've also slept less and all that makes us tired. But the fatigue has been masked by the hyperarousal. Now the hyperarousal is really fading. And now we feel the fatigue, right? Now we feel tired, which we didn't before. And that can be a little scary to people. Be like, what's wrong? I'm sleeping more, but I'm feeling more tired. It's just the hyperarousal is no, not there anymore. So the fatigue is unmasked. And so when does this fatigue lift? Well, I think it's always very tricky when we give like a timeline, but I would say this, that this like post-arousal fatigue, it's not something that goes on for like, months, many months at least. Like I would say it's something that I expect happen to sort of like fade over a couple of weeks, something like that. That's sort of how I think about it. And I just want to add to that if somebody's had like fatigue, like just feeling like I never have any energy, and that's been going on for like many months, and maybe more importantly, it's not changing. Like no matter what I do, I'm always just as tired. Like there's no changing the fatigue, like etc. Then I would say that it may be time to think about like emotional fatigue, which is basically like when we treat fatigue as an emotion, we don't want to feel fatigue and we try to avoid the fatigue, and the avoidance of it actually amplifies it. So that's just a little addition to that. But yeah, Killer Kenyon, I hope that made sense to you. And we will move on to a question from Suleiman Bismillah Argandewal. Probably didn't, pardon me for probably not pronouncing that correctly, but thank you for being here and asking this. So the question here is, the less we think about sleep, the better we sleep. But how do we not think about sleep? Oh my goodness. Yes, this is a very, very insightful question. And you may have seen or not seen a video I made. When was this? Oh, yeah. It was the North Star, which was, I think, 2 weeks ago, where I actually start off that video with it's like kind of semi-fictional conversation with a client. And it goes like this: client, why can't I sleep? Me, insomnia happens when we give sleep a lot of attention. Client, how do I stop thinking about sleep? Me, by allowing yourself to think about sleep. Client, this sounds like a paradox. Me, it is. This is a paradox. I mean, everything here is true. That's meaning it is true that when we're not thinking or worrying about sleep, we're not trying to sleep, it just happens by itself, right? Which then leads to this logical question, like, so how do I stop thinking about sleep? And this is the paradoxical thing, is that if I tell you don't think about a pink elephant, you'll think about a pink elephant. But if I on the flip side say to you, you cannot think about anything but a pink elephant for 10 minutes, it's really hard to do that, because then our mind starts to drift away. So the paradoxical thing is, like, when we find ourselves thinking about sleep all the time, and we're like, I can't think about sleep, then we think about it all the time. But when we find ourselves thinking about sleep all the time, and we're like, that's okay, I'm going to allow whatever thoughts happen to happen, then it's like this message from the brain, this kind of worry message from the brain, like that is about sleep. It's been heard by us. We've heard the message. We acknowledge the message. We're letting our thoughts be. Then the brain eventually goes like, oh, we don't need this message anymore, and it fades away. Now, exactly how that happens, exactly how these things happen is a little bit of a mystery. But just knowing that when we let thoughts be, when we let thoughts happen, then they become fleeting instead of like ongoing. Like when we have ongoing, like the same thought over and over and over again, that happens because we want to not have that thought, and the brain kind of bombards us with that thought. A little bit paradoxical, but common question, and I hope that makes sense. Donald is there, longtime supporter. Nice seeing you here, Donald. And Donald says, I don't even think about sleep now until I watched your channel, and it's all down to you. I think that means like thanks to you. It's super nice to hear that. And Donald says, and it's all yes, yeah, absolutely. So glad to hear this. Jamie says, speed bumps are expected. The action is always non-action. That's very true. Kevin is here, and where did that question go? Where did it go? Okay, here. Kevin Fun is here and saying, I'm struggling with sleep maintenance. What should I do? I really miss the days where I sleep, and when I open my eyes, it would be morning time. To fully break free from insomnia, should one stop using melatonin? I was told you can grow dependent on it. Okay. Sorry, I got a little distracted. I just want to say that I saw Sierra here. Nice seeing you, Sierra. All right. Kevin, yes, sleep maintenance insomnia. I think I just made a video on that not long ago. And I want to say that I have this, like, for someone who tells me that they have sleep maintenance insomnia, or like, I always wake up at this time of the night. What should I do? I have like these 3 things that I summarize in our NATO teaching around, middle awakenings, middle of night awakenings. So the first thing I tell someone is, like, when you find yourself, like, you wake up at night and you find yourself awake at night, I think it really helps to not know the time. Kind of often our instinct is like, I got to know what time it is. That's our brain trying to have control, but control is what makes us struggle, right? So I think the number one is like, uh, just resist the urge to check the time. If you happen to see the time and you can't resist the urge, just deploy kindness. That's totally fine. But often, like, just not knowing the time can really help. That's kind of number one. Number two is like, not arguing with the reality. So when you find yourself awake at night, it can be disappointing and frustrating, and because you'd rather want to sleep, right? So then we can go into this, like, I shouldn't be awake now. I have to do something to sleep. What can I do to sleep? When then we're arguing with the reality. We're just trying to change a circumstance that is just like what it is, like, and then we have more struggle. So first of all, I say resist the urge to check the time, and second is don't argue with the reality. You are awake now, and the more you try to make yourself sleep, the more struggle you're going to have. And then three, I think it really is befriending wakefulness at that moment, which is, okay, I'm awake now. I would rather want to be asleep now, but I am awake. So what can I do that makes it a little bit easier to be awake right now? Is that going to be just resting in bed? Is it going to be watching an episode of Friends, right? Is it going to be like listen to a podcast? Is it going to be reading? Who knows? Like, that's up to everyone here, right? But when we go towards befriending wakefulness and like making wakefulness more acceptable, then the brain isn't so afraid of being awake anymore. And the next time you wake up and you're like, okay, I'm awake, well, I can read my book, that's all right, then you're going to fall asleep easier because the fear of being awake is fading, right? So those 3 things I think really help. And then finally, I think that's going to be our final question for today. Do I have to get off melatonin to break free from insomnia? Well, basically, the tricky thing with cycles like insomnia, the insomnia cycle, is like, trying to break the cycle is the cycle, because it's a cycle of resistance. Insomnia cannot happen if we don't want to get rid of insomnia. It's very paradoxical, but insomnia doesn't happen if we're not trying to stop insomnia, right? And when we're no longer trying to stop insomnia, insomnia doesn't exist anymore. It's very paradoxical. But that takes us to the melatonin. So if someone thinks like, I have to stop melatonin so I can get rid of insomnia, then there's going to be more struggle, because they're going to pressure themselves and they're going to think that it's important I get off, and now I'm off it. I think I will sleep more. Oh no, I didn't. Like, that's a whole cycle. So yes, sleep efforts are very helpful to be aware of, because when we know that, I'm doing this to try to sleep more, then we know that the more I try to sleep, the less I sleep. And then when we see this clearly, those sleep efforts no longer have any like real impact. We can still take melatonin, but kind of like a vitamin, it's just like a habit. I take it, but I know it doesn't make me sleep. Then the effort is gone. The effort, the pondering, the thinking, the milligrams, like all that is gone. And the melatonin is unimportant, even if we take it. So I would say somebody can sleep really, really well taking melatonin. Somebody can sleep really, really well not taking melatonin. It doesn't really matter, as long as we have the understanding and the awareness of sleep efforts. Then that awareness really neutralizes the effort. So I'm gonna pause there for today. I want to thank everyone for being here and contributing with questions. And as always, like, if you're finding your way, that is wonderful. Please share it. But if you feel sort of lonely, stuck, if it's frustrating, and you would like a more curated path where somebody's guiding you towards sleeping well, sleeping peacefully, then please know that we can help. We can help you in so many ways. Maybe you want to do a call with Coach Michelle. Maybe you want to join our Insomnia Immunity program or BedTyme. But whatever you choose to do, it's going to be wonderful seeing you on the other side. It's been really nice being with you today, and hope to have you back here real soon. Until then, Stay out of trouble. Bye now.